Hi, this is PD at BurgZerg Arcade at BurgZergArcade.com, and this is tutorial 175, I believe. And let's just go ahead and open up our Unity project. So we've got the ability to load up our default fat guy, and we can change the sex of our character. And we're using the, I think it was Sexy Cube as the first model for our female. Next, I want to start working on these little rotation keys. Something really quick and simple to get done. So let's go ahead and create another script. I'm just going to right click on my script folder, create, I'm going to create a C# script. And I'm just going to call this rotate player arrow. And I'll just find it here. We'll open it up in MonoDevelop. I'm just going to drag it over here. And the way I want this to work is when I click one of these arrows, it's going to send a message out to start rotating our character mesh that we currently have loaded. And of course, when I click the other one, it will just rotate the other direction. So we'll be using the broadcast messenger again. So let's just go in, and there's going to be one boolean that I want to set up at the start to whether or not if we're going to rotate clockwise or not, because I'd like to use the same script for both arrows. So we'll make this public so we can access it in the inspector. So type bool, and I'm just going to say rotate clockwise. And I'm just going to start that off as being equal to true. And of course I'll want to make sure I change the name of the class. And that should be enough to get us started. So let's go ahead and select one of our arrows in our scene view, and let's attach this script. So I'll just throw it in down here, and of course this one rotates counterclockwise, so I'm going to want to uncheck that, and I'm going to select the other arrow over here, make sure I got it, and I'll drag that on. I'll try it again. One last time. It doesn't seem to want to add. And it helps if I'm actually adding the script to it and not trying to drag it onto itself. So we'll just add this on. I'm going to shrink this down. It was shrunk down. And let's just take a look here. We want this one to rotate clockwise, so we don't have to uncheck that. Great. I don't believe there's anything I'm going to need in start and update. So let's just get rid of both of those. And if we actually go to our sex change part, there's a lot of code we could probably just cut and paste right out of there. So our gender changer, let's load that script up. And I'm going to want pretty much the exact same things. Mouse enter, mouse exit, on mouse down we want something to go off, and also we want it to be able to change color. So I'm just actually going to cut and paste all that. There's nothing in start we need. So I'm going to come back to my rotate player arrow, and I'm just going to paste it all in. Let me see here. We won't be doing anything with rendering of the materials. I'm going to comment this out because we will want to send a message, but not that message. And I just want to get the ability to change the color when we mouse over it. So yeah, everything looks okay. I did save it right. I did. And let's just go back into Unity and we'll fire it up if there's no errors. Apparently there is one. So we'll just save that off. We'll come back into Unity, let it recompile. The error should disappear. It has. So let's just start it up and just make sure that the hover events are working. And it looks like they are. They're turning different colors. So let's stop that. We'll go back in. Probably actually going to need to use our update function here, and the reason why is when we click the button, we'll want to set some Boolean value in our update telling this script that, hey, we've pressed the button, and we'll probably also want to get the on mouse up event to let us know that the button is no longer being pressed. So let's actually add that up button right now. So we'll just add the on mouse button up, and let's just throw some debug logs in here just so we know that those are firing. And we're just going to say button down. And we'll come over here and just say button up. I'll just quickly save that off. We'll head back into Unity and we'll fire this off just to make sure those are working as well. So if we watch down here, we'll see button down, button up, button down, button up. Great. So we'll head back into MonoDevelop and I'm going to make a private bool. And I'm just going to call this button pressed or arrow pressed. And of course I'm going to start it off as equaling false. And right now I'm going to make my update function, the one we just deleted a while ago. And I'm going to check to see if the button is being pressed. So if arrow pressed, so basically we're saying if the arrow is pressed, this is where we're going to want to broadcast our message. So let's actually just get rid of these down here. And the message we want to broadcast will be rotate player clockwise. And what we're going to do is pass in this value. And because we're passing in a value now, we have to tell it what type we're sending. And that's just going to be a bool. And let's tab this in so that we know it belongs to this block of code. And that should be everything we need there. I'm going to come into my player customization model. And add a function to actually start rotating our pivot point. Now, of course, there is another way we could do this, and that is to get a reference to the pivot point here. And when we press the button, rotate with the reference that we have. Because I really want to keep these things separated. I don't want to couple things together, so the rotate arrow depends on having your character mount in-game. Like later on, maybe you want to use this to rotate something else. And it just saves, if you forget to make the link in the inspector. And while sending messages is a little bit slower, it's not really that much slower that we're really going to notice any difference here. So we're going to make it public. We could make it private too. It really doesn't matter. Actually, I'm going to make it private. We made the last one down here public, but that's fine. We'll just make this one private. It does not return anything. And I'm just going to call it the exact same. So on, well, almost the same as the message. Rotate player. Well, I'm just going to say on rotate clockwise, because we're not actually rotating the actual player. We're rotating the pivot point, and the player is under the pivot point, so it should rotate with it. Now we are taking in a bool, and I'm just going to say this bool variable is called clockwise. And for now, I'll just put a debug in there, just so we know the message is getting it. And I do want to append one thing onto here, and that's what value we're receiving from our message. And if we come up to on enable, I believe I've added those, yes. I'm just going to cut and paste that in, and we'll grab the message. And we'll just paste it in, and we'll have to make sure that we tell it what type to expect. And then the method that we're using. There we go. And again, I'm just going to cut and paste this down here and change the method. So instead of adding the listener, we're removing the listener. Everything else should be the same. Let me just take one quick look back in here. I'm not seeing anything else that needs to be changed. Well, yeah, we actually need to put the code in here. So we'll just say if, and we actually want if not arrow pressed. We don't really need a check, actually. We'll just say arrow pressed equals true. And in here, we'll just say arrow pressed equals false. So when they press it down, we're going to start sending out a message saying, hey, we've got it pressed down, and when we let it up, we don't send a message. So let's go back into Unity. I'm actually going to not maximize on play because I really want to watch my console this time. And let's just start it up. And I'm going to start with the counterclockwise one. So if we press, we see we're getting a whole bunch of messages saying rotate player false. And if we start pressing this one, I'm just going to clear it just to make it a little bit easier to see. And we should get the true. Alright, so we know we have it connected and it's working. So let's head back into our player model customization script. And let's go back down. So down here is where we receive the message and we're saying, hey, we're rotating clockwise or not. So we actually need a way to actually rotate this. So the easiest way would be just to add our own update function again. So I'm going to go ahead and add that in here. And we'll just want to check to see if we're receiving some message. If we are, we want to rotate. So we're going to come down here and just say, I guess we're going to need some way to store this actual variable. But we'll also need a toggle to tell us when to rotate. So before we actually add any code down here, let's come up here and I'm going to put it right before my constants. And two Boolean values. One's just going to be called rotate. I'm just going to say rotate me. And by default it equals false. And then we'll have another one that's private. Hit the wrong key there. And I'm just going to call it, let's call it rot direction for rotation direction. Actually, no, we want to know if it's rotating clockwise or not. So I'm just going to put rotate clockwise. And I'm going to start that off equaling true. And since I made both of these private, I like to use my underscores. So now we can come back down here and add that. So the first thing we're going to want to do is say rotate me is equal to true. And then we'll want to check this Boolean value. Actually, we don't even really need to check the Boolean value. We can just say, I just can't spell rotate right today. Rotate clockwise is equal to clockwise, the value we're receiving in here. And I'm just going to stop that. We'll come up to the update and we'll just see if rotate me, in other words, if we're supposed to be rotating this frame, then transform dot rotate, it would be capital R. And if we take a look here, we want to know on the vector3, well, there's lots of ways here. I'm just going to use the first one. So I'm just going to say vector3 dot up for the y axis. I'm going to multiply it by time dot delta time. And we are going to want some sort of offset here. For now, I'm just going to hard cast in 100. Just so we can rotate a little bit faster than normal. And let's just actually go ahead and just try out that one line of code. So I'm going to head into Unity and I'll just start this up. I'll go ahead and clear the console and I'm going to press a button. So there we go, but we notice that he's not stopping. So we can go back into MonoDevelop and right after here, let's say rotate me equals false. That should stop him for the frame. We'll start this back up and we'll just take a look to see how that affects it. It might cause a little bit of jerking, but let's just take a look to see. Actually, it doesn't, so that works pretty good. Let's go ahead and add in the other direction now. So we're receiving a Boolean value that tells us to rotate clockwise or not. So what we're going to do is just come down here and just check the value of that Boolean value. So it was, I think, rotate clockwise. So if we are going to rotate clockwise, great, do it this way. And if we're not rotating clockwise, then that means we're rotating counterclockwise. So I'm just going to take this, and there's a couple ways we can do it. We can say vector 3 down, which is the opposite, or we could keep it as vector 3 up and throw a negative in front of any of these values. I'm just going to say down, just, it makes more sense to me. And while I'm here, I'm also going to get rid of this hard casted value. I'm going to make a public float for us to use in the inspector. And I'm just going to call this rotation speed. And by default, I'll start it at 100 because that did actually seem to work pretty good. And I have a typo here. This should be clock. Whoops. And since I've used this already in other places here, I don't want to have to go through and manually change them all. So if you right click on it, you can just hit refactor, hit rename, make any adjustments to the variable name you want, hit OK, and it'll actually go through and change them all for you. I think I've only used it one other spot down here, and as we see, it actually did make the change. But let's come up here and replace this 100. We'll save that off. I'm going to head back into Unity and let it recompile. Clear it out and let's start it up. Everything should be working now. So we can still rotate clockwise, let go. We can rotate counterclockwise, let go. Change sex, and we'll probably have to change the size of that cube as it's covering up our rotation keys. So that's something we'll have to take into account. But anyway, there's a quick way to easily rotate your character on his little pedestal here. I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.